I'm Mel Stewart, and this is SwimSwam Podcast. Joining me today is a very special guest, someone we've wanted to get on for a long, long time, personal friend, and 10-year national team member, Olympic champion, BJ Bedford Miller.
Yeah, Miller in the quotes.
I added
the alter ego.
I added in the Miller. We have to add in the Miller because everybody loves your host.
Oh, thanks.
I wanted to have you on because it's not all folks who have represented Team USA have done it as long as you have, or have as some swimmers, they come to prominence, especially during the 80s and 90s and into 2000. And there's a lot of athletes that are there for 3-4 years. You were at it going back. You were at it for 10 years. I mean, 92, you were 7th at trials in the 100 back. 96, you were 3rd at trials, but you were making national teams all the while.
Yeah. And
that was an interesting thing because I'd forgotten about that. I'm like, oh my God, BJ understands the experience of getting 3rd at trials.
Oh yeah. Christy Cowell and I were talking about it. We were calling it the 3rd place club.
I'm in the 3rd place club.
Yeah. We're all the 3rd place club, where you just know that crushing disappointment of like, what could I have done? And that mental masturbation you go through in your head of like, did I eat something wrong? Could I have changed a thing and gone? It's yeah.
Well, it's an important part of your character, of anybody who's in the 3rd place club's character. But you at the same time you ascended on to 2000, winning gold, and you did it with this at the Sydney Olympics, star-studded relay with Megan Gendrick, Megan Kwan at the time, Jenny Thompson, and Dara Torres. Mm-hmm. But what I find fascinating, you won nationals 6 times in the 100 backstroke. You're an 8-time national champion. You swam at the University of Texas. You swam at Petty. You have a storied career with deep experience. So you understand the full elite experience. And the reason why I wanted to have you on is that we all watched, I think most of us watched HBO's Weight of Gold, with Michael Phelps foisted over. And my personal feeling was, wow, I'm so glad he did this. This was amazing. This was so good for athletes in the sport and for parents of athletes. But I also felt like maybe that was the first chapter, and this should have been a 6-hour series, and we needed 2 more episodes, because a lot of athletes who have experience with depression after the fact, typically there was a trigger. There's a history going into it. And every national team member typically is hiding something or overcompensating for something because of deep insecurity. You know my insecurities. I know your insecurities. We're going to lay yours threadbare today.
Do I get to ask questions about yours too? No, just you.
This is all about you. But so what was your feeling when you watched the documentary, and how did you process it from a personal standpoint with your history?
Okay, so first of all, I'm still trying to figure out how to watch it. I don't have HBO. I've gone all over the place, and I'm trying to circumnavigate all of the controls so that I can watch this thing, because I'm so obsessed with I want to see this, because everything I saw in the trailer, you could see the trailer, and the conversations I've had with other athletes, this is something that every single one of us goes through. It's something that is so resonant and so close to my heart. And I'm I want to watch it. And I have not yet. Just full disclosure, I can imagine what's probably in there because I've been through it, but I'm I want to see the whole thing.
With that kind of a lead in, you're supposed to go, yeah, I watched it. I understand the detail. So I'll sum it up for you. It is that you win. Mm-hmm. Life suddenly gets very busy, and then it doesn't really change. And turns out that you're the same person that woke up the day, the week before when you weren't a gold medalist. And you have to deal with that. And what it did, there were many narratives. There was only one narrative where they actually talked about the one of the athletes was suffered sexual abuse, and they were hiding that, and they were hiding that shame. So we found out. So they won. They after the fact they go into this deep depression. It's so we didn't get everyone's backstory, and that is what's fascinating, is that most athletes who are achieving at a high level are they're overcompensating for something. There's a deep insecurity, and I will say this: I had a deep insecurity. It was very, very deep, and it was very. I thought that I was an imposter, and and I was scared to death that people would call me out all the time, and I just, all I knew to do was to win, just try to win, because if I win, it'll all go away, and that's not true. It's a lie.
Yeah, totally. So, like you, I talk to people about. Honestly, okay, let me rewind. I still struggle a little bit with how do you talk about this without, because I don't want to make myself different than everyone else. I don't want to be set apart and put on a pedestal. Like, I am looking for human connection. I'm not looking to be anyone's messiah or anyone's leader, right? Like, I just want to, and I will talk about the Olympics and say, look, everybody has their Olympics. Mine was televised, right? And I can tell you my favorite race in the world was like New Hampshire State High School Championships. One year when like I raced Jenny Thompson and the two of us were in the 100 backstroke and I barely beat her, and I was like so excited because Jenny's a badass, right? Like, and you don't beat Jenny very much. So that was one that I remembered. But I will definitely say being on the national team for that long, for a decade plus, there's very few functional people at that level, right? Very few. All of us were compensating or hiding or looking, it's like the center, like your nexus of control of your brain and like your self-worth is something outside of you that you feel like you can get with a medal, right? Like, if I can just get over there, I'm going to be okay. Like, and you have posters of people on your wall. You're like, I'm going to be that person. And then you wake up and you're still you. And you're like, damn it. But you see, and I feel like I'm not taking this in a very linear way or answering your question very well. You see somebody every year is the sweetheart of the games. It's Michael, it's Summer, it's Amy, whoever it is. That could be me. And life can change. Like, there is that brass ring. And a lot of the time it's a swimmer. Like, so there's this piece of your narrative that's like, it's all bullshit. Logically, like in your brain, but in your heart, you're going, it's the answer. It's the answer. Like, that's how I rise above all of this crap that I've carried around in my life. And that's how, for me, I think everybody talks about nobody talks about their insecurities of what drives them. And I do think it's more about loathing yourself if you lose than loving yourself if you win.
Well said. Well said. Let's so people don't. Let's put this into context, and this is a truth for me. You can share it. It does help to be on that journey, striving to be something better. It does keep you on a path. I think it might be accurate to say that not for everyone, but for many of us, if we hadn't been on that path, we might have had a very, very destructive life. So this kept us on the straight and narrow, and experiencing achievement is a piece of the puzzle, but it's not the magic. It's not the magic elixir.
Right.
It's so we are profoundly humbled by this achievement, and that we've had the opportunity, and that people supported us on the path. But we are also socialized, and we're all socialized. We think that it's going to be the answer, because outwardly that's what the world tells us. That's what the media tells us. And that is the impression you get as a kid and a teenager and then a young adult. And that's the truth. The truth is, we're told that's the answer, if it's indirectly from every direction, but it is not the answer.
Right.
So yeah, I didn't want to say like everybody who goes to the Olympics is trash and they're all mentally unstable.
But we're beautiful trash, man.
beautiful trash. But I'm just adding a little bit of context.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So in terms of where you were, in terms of that kid, take me back to when you were that kid and you were like you're going to 92 trials and you're finaling. You're young. Where's your head at?
Yeah. Let me take it one step before that. I qualified when I was 14 for 88. So I qualified for trials. And I didn't even know what trials were, right? My friend Karen Swenson came up to me. I went to junior nationals. I got second to Jenny in the 100 back at junior nationals at the Justice Aquatic Center in Orlando, Florida. And I think I went a 57 in my 100 back and at 14. And Karen Swenson came running up to me and goes, "You just made Olympic trials." And I'm like the real Olympics? Like the ones on TV? Like what?
You went 57 yards.
57 the 100-yard back, yeah.
Yeah, you got to say yards now because people.
I know. I never broke a minute. My password to everything was 59.99, right? Like I just wanted to break a minute in the 100-meter backstroke, and now it's like everybody's doing it.
14, you drop a 57, you make Olympic trials. 100-yard back, you drop a 57. 1988, you make Olympic trials. Just so the swim nerds will be happy.
Right. That's when it was a 57.44. That's when that's when the imposter syndrome began, right? Like that's Olympic trials. Like that's the real deal. And I'm like, oh, I'm not the real deal. I'm a freaking kid. I'm 14. I'm like, oh my God, really? And then I went through, that was 87. So I went through a year and a half of just sucking, like just sabotaging myself and like not going to practice. And I was scared to death to be the real deal. Like none of that made any sense to me that could happen for me. I wasn't used to, I was used to racing, but I wasn't used to winning. I lost a lot more than I won. I grew up with freaking Jenny Thompson in my backyard. I didn't win stuff. That was her.
For any young swimmers out there, Jenny Thompson, 12-time Olympic medalist. She's a doctor now.
Yeah.
And 12-time Olympic medals, and like she has 8 goals. So there's Dara Torres has 12, Natalie has 12, but Jenny has 12 with the most gold medals. So really the most, in terms of just hard metrics, the most successful female swimmer in history.
Yep. And nothing she couldn't do, right? They just put her on a relay when they needed to win, right? And I'll tell you, having been on the national team with her on a relay, I'm like, oh, we got this, right? Jenny's such a competitor and she's such a rock star. But, it started in 88 where I didn't think that I was worth it. But I think all of us start with some sort of reason why we need to win, right? And I was the youngest of 4, the only girl. My mother is an amazing human being, raised all 4 of us. My oldest brother's really, really smart, and he has his PhD in fluid dynamics. Swimmer also. We were all sort of family of swimmers. He started it all. But I think my mom was the mother, father, everything, because my dad was, his version of what it is to be a good dad was, I'm going to go and earn money and give that to the family. And that's how I'm a good dad. Like he was not engaged. He was not loving. It just wasn't who he was and isn't who he is. And that's fine, but that wasn't what I was looking for. So for me, that hole of like, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I have to win to show that I'm good enough. Or it's just the question of, am I good enough, that I ask over and over and over. And swimming races was a way that I could get an answer for a second. Yes, I am. No, I'm not. Yes, I am. No, I'm not. But in reality, I was looking to fill that void that was left by not having that from my dad. So it kept getting higher and higher levels of, am I good enough, and more pressure. So Olympic trials is like kind of the epitome of that, where I just, I sabotaged myself because I knew the answer was always no, right? No, I'm not good enough. Who am I kidding? I'm just some kid from New Hampshire. And it's so funny because it is this conversation you have in your head over and over of, well, some days I am, but it's, probably outnumbered by the days that I'm not. So that was what was driving me. And I think there are a lot of women on the national team who had similar backgrounds, and a lot of men too, I mean, it's yeah.
Parents have to fill up that love tank, and each kid is different. But we do see we look at the most extreme examples. Michael Phelps' dad was product of a divorce. He wasn't there. He was trying to.
I never saw Jenny Thompson's dad either, right?
Yeah,
Jenny's mom was such a strong force. I mean, I grew up with them, right? So I saw her whole family, and her mom was always there. Michael's dad was also missing. Like Ashley Tappan, I never saw. I saw Ashley's mom, never saw her dad. It's not something we ever talked about.
It's not in the Olympic Up Close and Personal.
Yeah, right? Where they show you with your dog and your boyfriend. Woohoo! I'm remodeling my house.
They always miss that dysfunctional, weird beat in your life that you're hiding is not a part of your narrative, and it's and it is the one, and it oftentimes is the one thing that's driving you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there's a certain point where you're on this journey to that Olympic dream because you've bought into the dream, and you are so into it. You live this monk-like existence at times. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes
I know. I was like, I don't know about monk.
Sometimes you're a complete mess because you might be dealing with addiction issues outside of the pool. Because I think a lot of athletes are as extreme as they are in the pool. They can be extreme outside in terms of drinking or drugs or anything that's destructive. But there are times where it's like when it's so hard, you feel like you're okay. And the way I describe it is there are periods of time when you're living this monk-like existence where you're in so much pain, you get so used to the pain and you're so okay with the pain, you have this numbness mid-season, and it's like that was my favorite time because I was so exhausted and so broken down. I didn't have space. My brain wasn't spinning out. Right. Did you experience that at all? Did you have moments where on that process where you're like, you kind of felt okay?
Yeah, I think the neurotic OCD focus that I had on the days when I focused on the dream, I could let everything else go. Right? And I I think that some of my friends and I were talking about growing up in New England. We don't have feelings. It's not a thing. You just deal with it, right? I'm good at burying things that are not sunshine and puppy dogs and unicorns. I'm committed to the happy for the most part. So when it's not happy, that can really, really kill me. But I think back to some of the really hard practices and how much I hated them. I hated it so much, but I loved having done it when it was done. It wasn't enough to drive me to want to do it because I hated that pain, right? But the physical pain was something that was real, and it could take, when there was that physical pain, whether it was lactic acid from the workout you did the day before, or it was in the middle of a set where you're just burning out, right? That was very present, and it was the only thing that you could feel when you were in it, right? There just wasn't anything else. And I used to say, and you'll love this, because I could swim fly. I wasn't going to win nationals at fly, but I could final. I could probably make top 8 in 100 fly. I could pull one out. I actually always had to swim it at Texas because somehow we didn't have butterflyers. It's hard to swim it on the relays. It was annoying. But I would say you got to chase the pain, right? It's going to hurt anyway. I might as well be in control of that. So I would go chasing that pain. I I would take it out. I'd be like, all right, I can take it out easy, or I can take it out hard, and it's going to hurt either way. So how about I take it out hard and see how fast I can go? And, I'll control this pain. It's going to hurt. I know it's going to hurt, but I'm going to go get it. And that was when I was in that, nothing else mattered.
The old saying that you've got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable is a hard thing that everybody wants to achieve. But if you've got baggage in your head, you're so used to living in pain that it feels familiar sometimes. And I don't know if you're aware of it when you're in the thick of it. But on that through line, all the years that you were on the national team, were you aware that everyone around you might have a similar experience? Not exactly the same, but some, that a little bit of that recipe in there where they're overcompensating. Were you aware of it, or did you have to retire and become an adult and have a career and step away and grow into a woman to go, this was more common than I thought it was?
I swam and I retired at 28, right? So I was relatively adult, or at least adult size, right?
Yeah, no, you're an adult.
So I did move through some of that. And, training with Ashley Tappan at the Olympic Training Center, training with Amy Van Dyken, who is someone who is so strong and comes from that place of insecurity, and having her tell me about some of that, like, it was at the edges of my perception, right? Like, I kind of knew it was there, but I was too scared to go into it with anyone, with myself, with anyone else.
So you were aware, but you didn't want to do any deep digging.
I didn't want to, like, oh, no, that's over there. We're not talking about that. Like, yeah, you got that too? Sweet. I got you. We're sisters. It's cool. But it's like, we didn't talk about it. I never talked to anybody about what my family life was like, except in that, I grew up with 3 older brothers. They used to beat the crap out of me, made me tough, made me quick, made me loud. And, we would joke around about those things, but it's not, you don't talk about, like, I was always looking for the love of my dad and just never feeling like I could deserve it or earn it or have any tangible evidence of it. Right. So I think we were all in that boat, but I think I knew, but I wasn't willing to face it. I don't think any of us were.
Complicated relationship with your father. Very complicated. And there's shame surrounding your dad.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
yeah, I'll say this. My dad worked for a televangelist in the 80s. He was a Guy Friday. He was a manservant. And I was always afraid that everybody would call me out because of that, because that televangelist ended up going to prison, sentenced to 45 years. His name was Jim Baker. So I always carried that with me, shame. And that's just one layer, but it's I thought that I was like the gold medalist of shame and backstory. And I don't want to make this a competition, but when you shared a little bit about your story, I was like, "Ooh, that's a unique set of circumstances."
Yeah,
I felt a kindred. I felt like I had a sister.
Right, and you do, man. You're definitely one of my kindred spirits in this journey. But while I was at the Olympics, my dad was in jail. And I was desperately afraid that in any interview, someone would be like, "Why isn't your dad here?" And I'd have to be like, "He's in jail." And
he's in jail.
Find him in the Palm Beach County penitentiary or whatever that was. But it was like, he was there while I was training, and it was horrible. And I was definitely very ashamed of him. And I think now I'm much more at peace. He's out of jail. When he served his time, and the guy's in a wheelchair, he's not really a threat to anyone anymore. But at the same time, like, he lives with that for the rest of his life.
How, so when you're as this adult grown woman, do you have compassion for that younger self? Like, how did you compartmentalize that?
That's a really interesting question. I thought you were going to ask if I had compassion for him, which I think I do. At the end of the day, I think everybody goes through what they do. Yeah, I'm dodging the question, aren't I? I am not sure the answer to that. It is not something I have ever really explored. I think that, do I have compassion for myself as a younger person? Yeah, I think I do. It's so hard to think about that without being that, right? Like it's hard for me to say like, I am looking back on me without being like, well, I'm still me, right? Like putting myself in that. So it's hard. It's hilarious that I could compartmentalize this whole crazy family drama that was going on. And I'm like, but I can't compartmentalize who I am now and to who I am then. I'm not sure the answer to that.
It takes a huge amount of bandwidth to keep that experience that you have, that reality, and stay on the path and achieve. And I know it hurts. So it's like, how do you do it? I mean, I know how I did it. I did it the same way I did it for years and years and years, which was just to push it down and shove it down.
Right.
Yeah, but there's how do you?
I was more afraid of the world finding out that I was broken than I was of being broken. You know what I mean? Like I was more afraid that everybody would find out than I was of hiding it. And like I was good at hiding it, man. I was the class clown of every trip.
You're not here's the thing. You're not a whole person unless you have achievement or unless you continue to be the class clown, this personality this construct of yourself that's moving toward achievement. And then you're going to be whole when you achieve it.
Right.
So you can't let anybody know. You can't let anybody know. No. And it's, the links that you'll go to hide it is huge.
Yeah. I mean, there were a few people who knew, but I mean, John D knew, my coach. Nelson Diebel, my best friend from high school, but he wasn't swimming anymore, you know? So yeah, there were not many people who knew. Well, I didn't want people to know that part of me, like, which I think is I feel a little bit sad and incomplete about, because that, as you say, it makes up the whole, as opposed to like the part that's just always happy, right? No one is always happy. I'm pretty close to, I'm like almost always happy. But yeah, it's the part that could everyone finding out about that would have shattered what the person that I had painstakingly constructed. Right. That would have shattered the image of like the fun-loving, happy-go-lucky, no problems. Well, I won't say no problems. I kind of walked the knife edge of the destruction and the joy. So I don't think it would have been that uncharacteristic for people to know.
We're moving down under 10 minutes. So I want people to realize that when so a lot of Olympians have an experience. It's not always the same, but it has the same effect on their lives as they're moving towards success. And then you do realize that you're not a whole person. This wasn't the ultimate healing magical thing, and you have to come to grips with that, and you start to build a real life. I feel like that's authentic. And it typically starts when you create your family, and you do it better. You do it better on the second time around. You do it better because you're like, for me personally, it was like, okay, I was successful at the Olympics. I can do this in family. And it's not always perfect, but it certainly seems like it heals a lot. And of course, there's therapy.
Yes, there's therapy, which I think is amazing. And I think everybody should go through it. Definitely. And it's become so accessible too. So I am a huge fan of that. I think I learned a lot of things about myself through these sort of these lessons that were the crucible of our trainings and our competitions, right? Like you're just this lump of coal that gets either squashed into a diamond or into dust. Is, either you come out the other side as way more committed to who you were, or as like a pile of nothing that's got to reassemble. I talked to my dad the day before he went to jail. I called him, and because he knew he was going in, right? He had he had a date, he had to show up. He wasn't going to miss it. He knew. He had plea bargained. But I talked to him and I was like, Dad, all I ever wanted was for you to tell me that you loved me and that you were proud of me. And he goes, I always loved you and I was always proud of you. And in that moment, something inside of my brain kind of shifted. And I was like, if I've been chasing this thing that I've convinced myself doesn't exist, but he says it does, and I'm looking for that from him, like it was somehow always there, but I missed it. So I'm looking at that going, if I have the ability in my head to create an existence where his love and pride in me does not exist, I got a pretty strong brain. Like, are you kidding me? I made up this reality and I lived into it like it was real, like it was exactly the thing. And I was like, why would I not choose to be happy if I can construct my own reality? Like, that's kind of where I went. So and this is why I say, like, your brain wraps itself around the logic of things, but your heart doesn't get it, right? Like in that moment, I felt free. I was like, I can do anything if I've lived in misery because this thing didn't exist. When it did, like, what else could I do? What else could I make up? Could I make up a reality where I'm like, awesome? Like, let's do that, which of course is absurd and didn't happen. But like, that was a conversation that I'll never forget. And it still did not give me the freedom to be at peace with it, with the world, right? It wasn't even something I did. And yet I was petrified that the world would see this and associate me with this, a pedophile, which is what that is. Like, I can't even hardly say it. It's just awful.
Yeah. It's, we're not our parents. We are
Right.
are an amalgamation of our parents, but we don't, you feel like you carry their sins.
Right.
That's natural.
Well, because people are like, oh my gosh, you're so much like you look so much like your dad. I can see so much of your family. And you're like, every time someone says something like that, my heart just goes, oh. Even though now, not as much, but back then it was like, oh my God, don't curse me with like, what if I am doomed to repeat the sins of my father? Or, which of last time I was attracted to a 16-year-old boy, I was a 14-year-old girl.
Yeah, that's not who you are. So we're down to 4:30. I want to kind of bring us back to a place of, you're Olympic champion, and in terms of your life as an adult, you're very successful. Some of the most fun I've had out, in the swim industry was when you were with Nike Swim, heading up their marketing. Tiff and I, spending time with you in Las Vegas at conventions, and you're very successful at what you're doing now. And and you're also the glue for national team members. If someone's had this experience, you are like this epicenter point, and people, you're like Jupiter. You have this gravitational force. So whatever you've done in the last few decades has been working. And it certainly feels a lot more authentic than when I look at the media back from when you were competing.
Right.
So You're getting it right.
Thank you. That is so kind. Since COVID, it's been really fun to kind of throw together some of these happy hours and see who shows up, right? And we have this spidery network of people who, oh yeah, I've got Jeff Rouse's number. Let me send him all of a sudden it's like we've got 30 former national teamers on a Zoom call. So that has been awesome, and it has given me such a great chance to reconnect as an adult with all of these awesome humans that I was not ever willing to let get to know me fully, right? Because we were all we were all playing our double game of like, no, see the good me. It's like the Chris Rock kind of thing. It's like when you first date someone, you're not dating them, you're dating their representative. Like, that's who we were. We're like, we're all our own best representatives, except when we're on national team trips for like a month and a half somewhere in a hotel and you can't help but see some of the crap. Then you're like, oh God.
That's okay. It makes you, I feel like the kids today are it seems like getting therapy and mental health is there isn't this,
there's not the stigma.
There's no stigma. There's no shame surrounding it. It's like getting help is a positive thing.
Right.
As we come down to under 2 minutes, I want to know from you if there's any parting thoughts or any wisdom you have for kids who might be going through the same path that you've experienced.
I think the biggest thing is to know that you're not alone. You know, we're all in this, and we've all been successful despite of and because of where we're coming from. And if you're going through like being ashamed of your family member or having something in your life that you don't want people to know about, like we have all gone through that. We are all in it with you, and you're not alone. That's the biggest thing.
You've been listening to the SwimSwam podcast. Stay tuned for new episodes every week. You can take SwimSwam podcast on the go by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Look for links in the description below, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos as well.